Loïcka Baille is a PhD student in the MIT WHOI Joint Program who travels to Antarctica to study climate change with penguins. As a mechanical engineer, she and a team of researchers design, build, and employ tracking devices and cameras to study just how penguins behave on a changing continent. Let's learn more.
Hey everybody! I am so excited to meet you all today. Thank you so much for tuning in wherever you are in the world. I am thrilled to share with you some of my passion and work I get to do with emperor penguins. But right before we get to penguins, let me quickly tell you who I am. So my name is Loïcka, and as you might have noticed, I do not have an American accent. And this is because I'm actually from France and Lebanon. After high school, I moved to the United States in Texas, where for my bachelor, I really wanted to learn more about biology, but also about how to make things, how to build things. And that is why I decided to study ocean engineering and biology. For 5 years of bachelor, I studied those majors, and then I moved to Boston, where I currently live, to do my PhD. I'm part of the MIT WHOI Joint Program, which is a wonderful program if you're interested in engineering and in oceanography, which is a study of the oceans. I'm doing my PhD in mechanical engineering, and some of my research involves studying emperor penguins. And right behind me in this picture, you can see little baby emperor penguins with their gray, fluffy feathers. But you might wonder, why do I want to study emperor penguins? Well, you might have heard, or maybe even noticed, that the world around us is warming up. When I was a kid, it would snow every winter in my village in France, but now it doesn't as much anymore. Climate change has an impact on our environment. And if we want to understand what is the impact of climate change in Antarctica, we need to measure it. But it's really hard to measure because Antarctica and the ocean all around Antarctica, which is called the Southern Ocean, is huge. It's really far away and really hard to reach. So if we want to understand how the life in the ocean around Antarctica is doing, we need to find a way to measure it. And we can look at emperor penguins. Emperor penguins live in Antarctica and swim in the ocean every day to find food. So if we understand how our penguins doing, then we can probably understand how Antarctica and the ocean are doing. There are 3 questions we would like to answer today. We want to know, how long do our emperor penguins live? Where do they go out to eat? And how much food did they eat? All right. Right before we get into it, let me tell you a little bit about Antarctica. So Antarctica is a continent located all the way down south. It is covered in ice, and it's the coldest place in the world. All around Antarctica, you have a very big ocean that we call the Southern Ocean. And in this ocean, you have many different species of animal living there. You have seals, whales, and penguins. And some things that you may or may not know is that polar bears do not live in Antarctica. Polar bears live all the way up north in the Arctic. Great. Now we know more about Antarctica, but how do we get there? It's so far away. Well, my team goes there using a plane. We all meet in South Africa. And from South Africa, we take a couple planes that get us to the Neumayer station. So Neumayer station is a German station. So in Antarctica, a lot of countries have different research stations. I go to the German one. And you might wonder, but I thought you lived in Boston. Why would you go to the German one? Well, that's a great question, but it just so happens that my advisor is actually a very nice German man called Daniel Zuderbart. So he started this program about 15 years ago at this particular station because he's German and because the station is located right next to an emperor penguin colony, which makes it really accessible to study. But you might wonder, how do you land a plane in Antarctica? We don't have a real airport. Well, you put skis on the plane, and then you hope you have a really good pilot. Great, we made it to Antarctica. Now, where do we stay? Here's a picture of the German station. It's a really nice station. It was built in 2008, and it can host up to 55 people. And that includes scientists, engineers, electricians, and chefs to cook us very yummy meals. We drive around using snowmobiles, and then we wear those nice warm red suits to keep us cozy. Wonderful. We made it to Antarctica. We dropped off our luggages. We're ready to do some science. First step to study penguins is to catch one. Here you can see an accelerated video of two of my colleagues slowly pushing away an adult emperor penguin and the two babies. The adult is a tall black and white one, and the babies are the gray, smaller, fluffy penguins. Something you might notice is the height of our adult emperor penguins. They're about 85 centimeters tall, or 3 feet tall. I always thought they were much taller, but they're actually just about your hip, as high as your hip. And then we put them in this little coral or this little pen to make sure that they don't walk away when we want to study them. First question we want to answer. How long do our penguins live? In order to know how long they live, we need to be able to recognize them. But to us, they all look the same. So it's really hard to tell who is who. So to do that, we put a little chip in them, just like you would chip your dog. This way I know that this dog, his name is Rocky and belongs to Fatima. Here I can tell you that this is Jack and this is Emily, and I know when they were born. And then, now that we can recognize them, we have a little robot driving around Antarctica, going from penguin to penguin, slowly scanning them to tell us who's there this year. And Echo, this little robot that you see, here is telling us that, this penguin is actually Emily, and Emily was born in 2015. Emily came back to the colony 3 times in the last 5 years, and Emily's doing well, and we hope to see her next year. And by doing this over many, many years, we can track how often do our penguins come back to the colony, how often did they breed, and how long do they live. All right, now that we can recognize our penguins, we want to know, where do they go out to eat? Penguins usually eat krill, fish, and squid. So if we want to know where the good food is in the Southern Ocean, we can just let Emily and Jack tell us where the good snacks are. And to do that, we put little trackers on their back, little GPS trackers that enable us to follow them during their adventures. And here you can see real tracks of Emily and Jack swimming all around the Southern Ocean. And what we learned is that penguins, especially young penguins, can swim really, really far out, over 1,000 miles or 1,500 kilometers, which is the equivalent of Emily swimming from New York all the way to Alabama, or from France all the way to Russia. Young penguins swim much further out because they don't need to come back to the colony every year. Until they're 5-year-olds, they'd have all the freedom in the world to go explore the ocean, whereas the adults usually stay a little closer to the coast because they have to come back next year to breed again. And if we can track our penguins over many years, we can see where the food in the ocean is and if those locations are changing throughout the decades. And maybe this will tell us if climate change has an impact on the life in the Southern Ocean. Great. Last question we want to answer. How much food did Emily and Jack eat? To answer this question, we have built a little penguin observatory that you can see on the left. It has a bunch of sensors and very fancy cameras constantly looking at the colony. Every day, it takes pictures and video of how the colony moves. In the right picture, all the little black dots that you see are adult emperor penguins. They lay in the frozen ocean, the sea ice, and in the background, you can see an iceberg. I am about to show you a video of how the colony moves. It contracts and then expands and contracts again. Try to see if you can see a pattern in how the colony moves with respect to the sun. All right, so if you pay close attention, you will see that when the sun goes down, like right here, all our penguins got really close together. They're forming little huddles, and it's because there is no sun. The temperature drops, our penguins start to feel pretty cold. So they want to share their warmth amongst themselves. But now, the sun has risen. The temperatures are getting warmer. Emily and Jack are getting a little hot. They need some space from each other. And by understanding how the colony moves, we can understand how cold our penguins are feeling. So if Emily found a lot of food in the ocean, then she would have accumulated a lot of layers of insulation. So she won't feel cold very soon. So she will start to get closer to her friends at lower temperatures. But if she's pretty skinny, she didn't find much food in the ocean, then she will get cold very soon. And by understanding at which temperatures penguins start to feel cold, we can tell how much food did they find in the ocean. All right, so what have we learned today? We learned that by understanding our penguins, we can get a bigger picture of how Antarctica and the Southern Ocean all around it is doing. If we can identify Emily and Jack and understand how long do they live, we can understand where they swim and how much food is in the ocean. And this tells us how healthy Antarctica is doing. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you so much, Loïcka. This is such cool work. We have a bunch of questions already in the chat from Nord Anglia students. And I'm going to start with a question from Avni. And Avni's wondering, and Avni's from Oak Ridge, and she's in the 5th grade. And Avni's wondering, how is the penguin life in Antarctica, and what are the challenges penguins face day to day?
That is a great question. Well, first, you need to stay warm. So our penguins need to find a way to stay warm. And one great way is to get close to each other. Then they need to find food. So sometimes they need to swim very far to find food. And the last challenge is to make sure they don't get eaten. So seals, they like to have penguins sometimes as a snack. Some seals, killer whales as well. So finding warmth, food, and staying alive are the 3 challenges I could say.
So they have a lot to handle each day. And I wonder, you showed us some really exciting devices and the types of tools you use to track and study these penguins. Can you tell us about mechanical engineering and the role it plays in all of this research?
Thank you, Fatima, for this question. Absolutely. So we get to develop the little robot going around scanning penguin. We built that. We are the one building all those cameras, looking at the penguin colony and figuring out how to power them, because we need to use solar panel, we need to use wind turbines. How do we keep them alive? And right now I'm currently building a new penguin tag. So we are able to tag many more penguins than we used to. So mechanical engineering is a critical tool that enables us to understand this environment that is really far away by building all kind of cool gadgets and technology.
And how do you come up with the ideas of the types of gadgets that you need? How do you find the instinct that I need a camera that does X, Y, Z? Do you work with a team and discuss goals? How do you decide which data you want to collect?
That's a great question. First, we always come up with a science question. So let's say I want to understand how the colony moves. Then you figure out what tools do I need. So if I want to observe the colony, I need cameras, but then I need to power my cameras. And then I need to have like computers that tell my cameras to turn on and off. So we always start with a science question, and we're a pretty big team. We have biologists on the teams that will tell us, well, this would be a good time to look at them. This is not a really good time to look at them. Then we have engineers like myself on the team that tell us, well, this is feasible. This is a little harder to do. And by combining all our skills, we can go from a science question to making it happen kind of thing.
So it's really interdisciplinary and a lot of team players are involved in this. I think that's really impressive. And I have a follow-up question from Manasi at Oak Ridge. And Manasi's wondering, you're tracking these penguins quite extensively. Do the penguins know they're being tracked? Are they used to these devices all around them?
That's a great question. We try to be as non-intrusive as possible. That's why this program actually started with just cameras. We would have this little container in the middle of the ice, just looking at them. They would not pay attention to it. They would not notice it at all. Then we moved on to, we kept the cameras, but started doing a bit more tracks and trackers and loggers. This is a bit more invasive, but we try to make sure that we don't harm the penguin. And we are able to gather such important data, like understanding where they swim, we can understand which area we want to protect in the ocean. So while we try not to bother them too much, we bother them just a tiny bit so we can protect them better.
Got it. And that leads me to a follow-up question I think is on a lot of our minds, and it's how do you get these trackers on the penguins? I think you showed us a nice picture of that. Can you walk us through that process?
All right, great question. So as I told you, first step is to catch a penguin. So we slowly isolate it out of the colony, very slowly because we do not want to disturb the colony. Then we put it in a little pen to make sure it doesn't walk away. Then one by one, we take gently, very slowly a penguin. We put it on my lap, and that's where the title of this webinar came from. I get to hold penguins while we take different measurements. So especially when we do the babies are really nice, round and warm and fluffy, and actually you touch them using your bare hands. And it's Antarctica, it's really cold. So putting your fingers under their fluffy feathers is just like a natural heater. It's wonderful. So I hold it while my team member takes different measurements. So we want to know how long the beak of Emily is and how long her flipper is and the other flipper. So we take a bunch of measurements. And once we have done all of that, we gently lay the penguin on its back and put a little, whatever tracker we want to use, a little GPS tracker. So we lay it, we put some tape all around it, little tie wraps. It does not harm the feathers. We have learned that we need to keep the feathers intact to make sure our penguins are waterproof. So this takes about 30 minutes to nicely put the tag on, and then we release it and just let it do its thing.
And then you showed that after you do a little bit of this work, you have that rover or that little device that's going around the huddle and the colony and just scanning them. How often do you run that?
Right now, we're still building it. So we run it only during the summer, which is the winter for them. So in the Southern Hemisphere, the seasons are changed. So when I go there in November, it's the start of winter in Boston, but it's actually the start of summer over there. So we will run and test our rover for 3 months, from November all the way to January. But the ultimate goal is for this little robot to be traveling around the colony all year round, at least as long as the penguins are there.
Got it. And next question from Aryan. And Aryan's wondering, if this experiment has been running for so long, what can you tell us about the results and the findings that you've seen so far and observed and how they connect to climate change? What are some of the conclusions you're able to make so far?
Ooh, that is a tough one because climate change, at least in Antarctica, is taking a long time to get there. We're slowly starting to notice, not so much via the penguins, but via satellite imagery, that maybe some of the ice is melting in Antarctica. Maybe some of the ocean might not be freezing as much as it used to. So through the penguins, I do not believe we notice any changes quite yet. We haven't noticed yet, but it's still early in the research that they have to swim further out to find food, which is a good sign. So while it has been going on for 15 years, good thing we have not noticed that our penguin health is declining yet. Hopefully it won't.
Yes, fingers crossed. And I'm glad to hear that that's the case so far. Now we have some questions about penguins in general and their behavior and what they're like. So we have a lot of curious, maybe perhaps wildlife biologists here. So Tiara from Oak Ridge is wondering, how do penguins communicate with each other, and how do they show affection and kindness based off of your observations? And then Tara's also wondering, do you think penguins can get lonely?
Oh, that's such a cute question. Okay, so what we know is that we cannot recognize penguins because to us they all look the same. We are pretty sure they all look the same to each other as well. They recognize each other by voice. We still don't understand quite how, but they understand, they recognize each other by voice. What else? Part of the question was how they show affection. You have beautiful pictures or videos of adult penguin rubbing each other's beak together. I think that's probably at least our interpretation of them showing affection and love. I have seen adorable baby penguins playing with each other, like picking on each other's feathers or stealing a feather from someone's beak, or they're very playful, very curious. Do they get lonely? I don't think so, because they're always in the colony. And even when most of the adults have left because the babies are big enough to take care of themselves, you can still see little gangs, little cliques of baby penguins walking around. So they're never really alone. They stay with their friends. They swim, we believe. We believe they still swim out in the ocean together. In little cliques. So penguins are very curious when they get to become teenagers. So the adults have left, and they just have to wait a little bit longer that their adult feather is ready, because the fluffy feather is not fully waterproof at all. So they need to lose their fluffy warm feathers to get their adult feathers, and this takes a little bit of time. So they hang out on the sea ice while their feathers are forming. And when we go study them, we might be tagging one penguin, and then all the friends want to come to you and check out what you're doing and have really funny pictures and videos of us starting in the middle of nowhere with one penguin that we caught. And then 10 minutes later, you have all the friends coming to check out, hey, what are you doing to Emily? Are you treating Emily correctly? So they're very playful, very curious, and have a lot of friends.
That is wonderful, and I've just learned so much there. That is all really wholesome, honestly. And you mentioned that, they recognize each other based off of their voices. So then we have a follow-up question from Avni. And Avni's wondering, so do baby penguins know how to talk? How do their parents recognize them?
That's a wonderful question. We're still trying to figure it out. They have different kind of calls. To us, they all sound the same, but we know that a mom will always find its own baby by doing certain calls. The babies do have voices. They do make sounds. Sometimes they even try to make an adult sound, which is super cute. How exactly it works, we're still studying it, but mommy and babies can recognize each other and find themselves.
And another question from another Nord-Anglia student, Charlotte. Charlotte's wondering, how long do penguins live? What is the average lifespan?
Great question. So in captivity, in the zoo, we know that they live about 35 years. But in the wild, we actually don't know. And that's why we started chipping them, just like you would chip your dog, to understand how often they come back, but also how long do they live.
Got it. And another penguin question for you, and then we'll move on back to some of the engineering. But what is the coldest temperature that these penguins can tolerate? So I think you mentioned pretty cold temperatures down there in Antarctica, and I bet it's pretty cold in the water too. So what have you learned about that?
Great question. And I meant to say it and I forgot it. So in Antarctica, it can get down to minus 80 Celsius or minus 112 Fahrenheit. So really, really cold in the dark winter. But when they do a big huddle, like in the dark winter, all the penguins get close together to stay warm. And the temperature inside of the huddle can be up to 30 Celsius higher than the outside temperature. So they have found and evolved ways to keep themselves warm because it's a really cold environment.
Got it. And so back to the engineering work, how often do you and your team actually go to Antarctica? And then for how long are you there? And then how do all of the instrumentation come with you? How does that get sent over?
Great question. Well, every year, part of our team goes to the German station, and we stay there from a month and a half to 3 months. 2 years ago, I went there to spend 3 months. In 4 weeks, I'm going again for 3 months. So because it's so hard to get there, it can take quite a bit of time. We want to make sure we're there for as long as possible, getting as much data and doing as much science as possible. To get the instrument, it depends what kind of instrument. Usually, we just fly them. But if they're really, really big, you can possibly have a ship go there. So once a year, the German ship called Polarstern goes to the station to fill up the station with instruments, but mostly construction material and a lot of food to make sure that there is food the whole year round. Most scientists come there in the Antarctic winter, so from November to January, and then leave at the end of the summer because it starts getting really cold, it starts getting really dark. In the winter, we get nighttime constantly. But a very few number of people, about 9 people, will spend the winter there to make sure that the base is still active, that all the different science questions happening at the base, all those measurements still are being done. So they need food, and that's why we have a ship once a year.
Of course. And we have a question from Alex now. And Alex is wondering, what's the biggest breakthrough in your research have you made while you were in Antarctica? Did you ever have, an engineering scenario that you needed to troubleshoot or modify when you were actually there? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
That's a tough one, Alex. That's the biggest breakthrough. Okay, usually at least the biggest challenges I've had to experience was to catch a penguin with just 2 people. We usually are more than 2 people. Just happened to be that we were only 2 available to do this. So catching and making sure our penguin is doing well with 2 people was quite a challenge. But this year I have a big engineering challenge, which is deploying those new tags that I made from scratch. So fingers crossed, everything will work as expected. It will not. It will probably have many challenges in between, but that will be my upcoming ask me this question again in 4 weeks kind of question.
Absolutely. That's totally fair. And there's a natural question that follows that. And it's how do you test these things that you're making here before you go? Do you stick them on your friends and track them? What do you do? How do you test them?
Yes. So it's hard to test for the temperature, obviously, especially, you can put them in the freezer, my little tags. It's hard to test for pressure, but to test for range, like how far can tag A talk to tag B, you can put them in your car and then you drive around and see, hey, did tag A notice that tag B went to buy some ice cream? And that's how you test for range. Then there are many variables that you just have to figure out when you're on site. But we try to prepare as much as possible. For instance, for the robot, we have a little simulation software that will tell us what the robot sees to try to troubleshoot all the scenarios we can ahead of time. But we can't troubleshoot everything because the conditions are extreme over there.
Of course, that makes total sense. Now we have a question from Arena at North Broward Prep School, and Arena's wondering, well, Arena says, this is very interesting and huge research. I echo that. Could you please tell us how studying at MIT, a very famous engineering school, helps you with this research?
Absolutely. Great question. MIT has taught me many, many things. MIT has so many resources. Like, I did not know really how to hold a screwdriver until I started grad school. And MIT has all those amazing maker shops where you learn how to use all those kind of tools. You learn how to do all kind of electronics, all kind of mechanical, using a lathe, using a 3D printer. MIT has great resources and usually really good professors that are really willing to listen and take the time to teach you. I went there as a graduate student, but I saw a lot of my undergrads having just so much experience already, way more experience than I ever had when they were so much younger than me. So MIT really gives this incredible space to learn the skills and apply them.
It really is a wonderful place to be. And now I have a question from Charlotte and Pauline. We got two folks wondering the same thing. Could you tell us a little bit about what extracurriculars you did when you were in high school or college that led you to this? And what were you interested in back in college? Did you know you were going to study penguins?
Great question. So I was raised on a farm. So I was always surrounded by animals, loved wildlife, loved nature. Then I moved to the coast of France and I started diving and I started sailing, kayaking, fell in love with the ocean. And in the meantime, I always had in the back of my head a desire to learn how to build things. So I wanted to combine everything and that's why I studied ocean engineering and biology. But then in college Station is a wonderful place in Texas, but it doesn't have water. But it had a great ocean engineering program. So I put a little bit on hold my passion for water while I was studying ocean engineering. And then as soon as I could, after getting this degree, came to Boston, where you had this wonderful interdisciplinary program, the MIT WHOI program. Highly recommend looking into it. Why Antarctica? I happen to, there is a lot of work in life, passion, and a little bit of luck. One of my professors was doing a research cruise to Antarctica when I was in undergrad, and I got to go there for a month from South Africa to Antarctica on a boat. And that's when I decided, okay, I have to see more of Antarctica. And I didn't know I would be studying penguins. I just wanted to do engineering and biology. And this is where life took me. So believe in life.
I like that advice. And now we have some questions about being in Antarctica. You don't go for a short amount of time. You're there for a bit when you're there. So we have a question from Aubrey and Reagan from the British School of Beijing. And they're both wondering, what's your favorite part of your day when you're in Antarctica?
Oh, all of it is wonderful. I would still say getting to see the landscape of Antarctica is just so out of this world. Everything is white. Everything is like going next to an iceberg. It's just so huge, so impressive, so majestic. It's so far away from everything you've ever seen during your day-to-day life that just going outside, taking a look, having sun 24/7. First time I came back to the continent, like to South Africa, and it was night, I just thought someone turned off the lights. So the whole thing of this environment is just out of this world. And then the community, you meet really interesting people on the base. That would be my second favorite.
Those are very good answers. So when you're at the station, Neumayer Station, what do you eat? So you mentioned that, food has to come in and you have folks who make very yummy food. So can you tell us what you're eating when you're in Antarctica?
Oh, a lot of German food. Um, like I think it's every Tuesday, we have pizza night. Um, we have, I think, pasta on Wednesday lunch. So you have some foods that are fairly well scheduled, just out of tradition, but on a regular basis, I would eat oatmeal, chia seed, potatoes, just anything you would eat like on your regular day. And they cook us a really yummy meal for Christmas, which is very nice and sweet.
That is really cool. That's very interesting. I guess we don't really think about, food as our first thing when we're learning about all this cool research when we go to these totally wild places. And that gives me a follow-up question about, harsh environments and traveling there from Rohit. And Rohit's wondering, has the harsh environment of Antarctica ever caused any of your trackers to black out or not communicate well? And how does that affect your research? Does the environment end up affecting the devices you're building?
Oh, that's a wonderful, wonderful question. Something I didn't know was how cold can really drain your battery. Like you would spend the whole night charging your phone or charging your GoPro to take really cool pictures and videos. And then you come out of the door with 100% battery charge. And then within 5 minutes, it's back to zero. So cold definitely has a fairly big impact on our technology. You learn little tricks like when we want to use glue, if we leave the glue out, it will freeze. So you just make sure to put it in your warm suit. Same thing for your battery. You just try to keep all the equipment you can warm, and one way would be to keep it with you. But yes, cold is definitely a big challenge that we learn every day how to deal with.
We have a question related to the emperor penguin. So you described that you're tracking these emperor penguin colonies and populations over time. We have a few students who are wondering why emperor penguins? There are many species of penguins, so they just want to know, how did you decide to use that species in particular?
Yeah, great question. My team study mostly emperor penguins because the German station is within 6 miles or 6 kilometers, really close to an emperor penguin colony. So it makes it accessible. But we have colleagues in the French colony at the Dumont d'Urville station that are closer to an Adelie colony or have a bigger Adelie colony next to them. So they study the Adelie colony. So different research team study different species. We just happen to be next to an emperor colony.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. It's a matter of proximity, and a lot of folks are approaching this different ways as well. So that's really nice. We have a question now from Charlotte, who's wondering, how do you approach work-life balance both when you're in Antarctica and at MIT? So I assume when you're in Antarctica, it must be feeling like work all the time. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you strike a balance?
It's a lot of work, but when it's your passion, it doesn't become work anymore. And I think that's something to try to find, something you love so much that it doesn't feel like work. We would be sometimes working until 3, 4 a.m. because we don't know it's 3, 4 a.m. It's still sunlight. But we love it so much that we don't feel it. We do take care of ourselves. So if there is a bad weather day, like a storm is coming in, we make sure to get as much sleep and food as possible. So we work a lot, but we try to take care of ourselves because we're there for a very long time. At MIT, surround yourself with people you love. Make sure you keep exercising. Make sure you keep eating. MIT can be quite intense. They will really teach you a lot, and this takes a lot of work. But try your best to stay healthy, and you'll make it out.
I think that's good advice for pretty much any scenario, especially ones that a lot of students may face now or in the future. So I think that's really nice insight, Loika. And unfortunately, we don't have time to ask all of the questions. We have, I think, over 80 in the Q&A pod yet unanswered, but I'm going to leave you with one closing question. So I think there's a lot of students who are really interested in the kind of research you do in this kind of work, and they hope maybe one day they could do similar work. Perhaps they want to be mechanical engineers, or they want to study climate change, or they want to go to Antarctica and work with the penguins. Can you give us some advice on how students can get there and what sort of skills you think they should develop?
Great question, Fatima. I'm so glad you asked. Because I used to be like all of you guys behind my screen, hearing and listening to someone telling about their adventure and their expeditions. And I always wondered, how do you get there? Well, there are, I think, different ways. How I did it, I found something I really loved. It didn't need to be super specific. I knew I wanted to do biology, and I knew I wanted to have the skills to be able to create technology to learn about biology. So I wanted different kind of skills related to biology. Then I worked for it. I found my passion, and I just believed in life, believed that a little bit of luck would come my way. And this got me exactly where I wanted to be.
Thank you so much, Loiko, for that. And thank you so much for just a wonderful Q&A. And now, before we go today, I just want to let you all know that next time we're really excited to welcome Sandra Liu, who's going to tell us all about squishy rainbow robots. I'm really excited for that one. And I'm really excited for this wonderful fall lineup we have ahead of us. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to all the students for asking such amazing questions today, such insightful questions. And thank you very much to the MIT North Anglia Education Collaboration for making this wonderful series possible. And thank you very much, Loïcka, for sharing your research with us and your time. Thank you so much. See you all next time. Goodbye.